Hello and welcome to CNBC TV 18. I'm Lata Venkatesh. After a decade-long wait, India has moved a step closer towards one nation, one tax dream. Yesterday, the Rajya Sabha showed the green light to the Goods and Services Constitutional Amendment Bill. The upper house passed this amendment by a two-thirds majority, actually by 100% present in voting. All parties except the AIADMK pledged support. The constitutional amendment will enable both the centre and the states to simultaneously levy the goods and services tax, which will subsume all the indirect taxes currently levied, including excise duty and service and sales taxes. CNBC TV 18 has been on top of this story, getting you all the top voices from the world of politics, industry and tax. Now it's the turn of the men from the North Block, the policymakers. We caught up first with the Chief Economic Advisor in the Finance Ministry, Dr. Arvind Subramanian. He is architect of the CEA panel of GST tax rate. I began by asking him if his proposal of an 18% revenue neutral rate will remain a pipe dream. This is a part of the conversation my colleague Sonia and I had with the Chief Economic Advisor.
Yeah, first of all, let me say that, I had recommended a range of rates between, for the standard rate between about 17 and 19%, yeah? But as the report makes very clear, that all these numbers are, of course, based on certain assumptions and conditional on certain policy choices that, the GST Council will have to make. Things like, how do you tax certain commodities? How much of the exemptions do you get rid of? In terms of the assumptions, what do we assume about compensation? So that's one part of it. The other part of it is that, the states themselves have only just begun these calculations in any serious manner. So over the next months, I think all of us are going to be going back to the drawing board, revisiting our assumptions, checking what new assumptions to make, and also see what policy choices are going to be made. Because it's finally that interplay of all of those which will, I think, determine the rate. A last point to make, of course, is that, the states, remember that we are really entering really uncharted waters for the states, for example, on services taxation. So the anxieties and uncertainties of the states are really understandable at this stage. So part of it, and caution and prudence would dictate that they don't want to lose revenue. So so they have a certain approach to these calculations. But so we'll have to see how this unfolds over the next few months.
Fair point, sir. But at the moment, the centre has given a huge backstop. They have said that every penny will be compensated for not just up to, but for a period of 5 years. You will have some ballpark calculation how much more expense it will mean for the centre to the states at 18% and at 24%?
No, I think that this compensation calculation is actually, if you think that the revenue neutral rate calculation was difficult and challenging, doing it for each state is actually very, very difficult, even more difficult. So at this stage, I'm going to treat take all numbers as fairly elastic and prone to revision. But my instinct is the following. My instinct is that we're moving from, at least for the centre, the excise from a kind of production to a consumption tax. So the intuition is that the largest potential losers are going to be the net manufacturing states. But I think my intuition tells me that because many of those states also have the largest urban centers which are going to be producing and consuming services, it tends to suggest to me that one shouldn't get over anxious about what these losses will be for the states, because Maharashtra has Bombay, Karnataka has Bangalore, Tamil Nadu has Chennai. These are all big service centers likely to generate a lot of money in services, revenues in services. And remember, services are the future. They're going to be the most I mean, they're a rising share of the economy, the most buoyant part of the economy. So I would be a bit cautious about any number, any large number that turns out from the compensation calculations.
Dr. Subramaniam, exactly, that is what would lead to perhaps an inflationary situation, because globally the experience has taught us that the first phase of GST leads to a higher inflation. Have you done any detailed calculation on what the impact could be on CPI if the standard rate comes through at about 18%?
Yeah. If you look at our report, for example, we have some very detailed calculations on the inflation impact for various, rates, various structure of tax rates. And, I think you have to begin by understanding that today, about 54% of the GST tax, 54% of the CPI basket is completely exempt, will be exempt from the GST. Another about 33-34% is taxed at the lower rate, and at the standard rate, in fact, only 12 or 15% is taxed. So, intrinsically, most of the CPI is taxed quite lightly, and that is even more true for the consumption basket of the poorest. So we're talking about a situation where the current effective tax rates on the CPI in the poorest is very small. Basically, food, essential medicines, these are all tax exempt. And that's likely to remain going forward. So I would again be very surprised at any inflation number that is, dramatic. In fact, our calculations suggest that, if you're around 20%, 18-20%, there is no inflation impact on average. I mean, of course, a few commodities here, a few commodities there, by definition, the incidence will go up. But on average, especially for the poorest, I would be very surprised if there's any impact on inflation at all.
Dr. Subramaniam, that's breaking news you're giving us. I mean, if it is even only 10 or 12% of the CPI basket that's going to be impacted, can you drill it down to just basis points? Assume now we are at 5.8%. If GST is applied, from the next month, exactly how much, or say from the next year, to give a year-on-year comparison, how many basis points? Is it 5, 10?
See, I'm not going to give you a number, because, you see, I think the first thing to understand is that if we're broadly right in coming up with a revenue neutral rate, that means the overall tax incidence has not changed from today. So by definition, you should have no aggregate inflation impact. There may be some distributional impacts across groups, product groups, or across segments of society, because, the structure could change a little bit. But by definition, or at a macro level, a revenue neutral rate means that the incidence on consumers will not change.
No, but then the basket of consumption goods are very different. So anyway, we'll get into that. It's good news that you give us that only 10 or 12% of the CPI basket of commodities is going to be impacted. That itself is something is positive, because there were a lot of people worrying about the near-term inflationary impact. The more important point, which you would be best aware of, is whether we can manage on April 2017 itself. We were discussing with bankers and with Mr. Shaktikanta Das himself, what if SBI, with a 10,000 branch network in 30 states, were to buy another services product like Finacle from an Infosys, and there is a lot of bewilderment among even lawyers or corporate taxmen as to how many GST numbers, registration numbers a bank will have to get, how expensive may its products become, how much set-off will they get, if at all, from the Finacle that they buy. There is still a confusion about whether we can start off on April 2017. You think so?
Yeah, see, I think that, look, without getting into all the details, I think we do have a tight, challenging deadline ahead of us. I think a series of steps, things have to happen. Now the states, 50% of the states have to ratify this. The GST Council has to be set up. The three laws then have to come and be passed. And of course, all the while in the background, the IT backbone has to be, set up as well. But let me say that one, I think a lot of the preparatory work has been underway for a long time. And two, I think the government and the states are completely committed to meeting this deadline. You know, of course there will be glitches, of course there will be delays, but the preparations and the intent and the commitment are there, and that's why I think that, you know, we should all be hopeful and confident that the April 1 deadline will be met.
Okay. Dr. Subramaniam, is there a clear idea of what the exact exemptions are? What are the exclusions currently?
Yeah, so the thing is that I think, remember that part of the discussion yesterday kind of related to this, and as the finance minister explained, that all these, you know, final decisions on exemptions, rates, thresholds, everything will be thrashed out in the GST Council and will then be decided thereafter. So I mean, but it's not that they're going to be starting afresh. Over the last many years, the Empowered Committee, various subgroups have been discussing all these issues. But, you know, the final decisions will have to be made in the GST Council, including those relating to exemptions, but not only restricted to them.
Well, that was the Chief Economic Advisor, Arvind Subramanian, telling us that the important takeaway would be at least inflation is not going to be impacted too much, maybe only a wee little, because of the imposition of the Goods and Services Tax. We'll take a break on that note, but don't go anywhere, because back from the break, we've got the Economic Affairs Secretary, Shaktikanta Das, as well as the Finance Secretary in a minute.